Good evening and welcome to another edition of Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette, broadcasting live from SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio from beautiful Cape May County, New Jersey. My guest today is Stephen L. Hayes. He's the chairman and president of Fair Tax Let me say that again. He is the chairman and president of fairtax.org, and he's going to talk to us today about the Fair Tax Plan and the Trump tax cut. How are we doing with that? And greetings, Chris Gaines from Northern Iowa in the Facey chat already. Welcome everyone from SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. I'm excited to have Steve on the show today. Because, with all that's going on with foreign policy, I feel like the whole tax situation has kind of has kind of been lost in the sauce. So I'm really happy to talk with him about that because we had an initial impact, if you will, with the tax cuts. Got raises in our checks and things like that, hopefully, and. But there are still some effects to come, some as far as the economy is concerned, and some, of course, still on a personal level. And then, of course, we have, hey, Terry, how are you? Adrian, Stephen, hello, in the Facey chat. And then and then, of course, we have the wild card, which is the little, I wouldn't call it a war at this point, but probably the tariff skirmish that's going on right now. So we have that going on as well. So I'm excited to have Stephen Hayes, who is an expert in all things taxes, who's going to talk to us about that today. But before we do that, and welcome Susan Toohey and Dwight Blackburn, welcome. A little bit about what's going on in the news. Lots of crazy going on in the news today. When I went and looked in my news source area today, which is usually LinkedIn, always has like the hottest things that are going on in business in the news. I was like, oh, goodness gracious. Google is getting hit with a $5 billion with a B dollar fine in the EU for breaching antitrust laws. The EU, for all of its drama and, lack of freedom, which, by United States standards, lack of freedom, they just don't play around. And Google got hit with a $5 billion fine. The European Commission claims that Google abused its dominant position by imposing restrictions on Android manufacturers, which would not surprise me. And they could have fined it up to 10% of its annual revenue. That's $11 billion bucks. And that's the latest penalty. Last year, they were fined with $2.7 billion. That's crazy, for promoting its own shopping comparison service. Now, if you've ever done any kind of shopping comparison, like if you've ever, thank you, Adrian. If you've ever just done a Google search for a particular product, Google has like a shopping comparison service, which, I mean, you could see. This is capitalism, right? Like, I guess you could argue that's unfair, I guess. But if you are a savvy consumer, like, you kind of know that that's what Google does. Because my guess is, my assumption is that in order for you to appear, I don't know what the business model is, but this is just like an educated guess. In order for you to appear there, you probably have to pay Google a certain fee or whatever, and then you appear in the top 10 when somebody's searching for, I don't know, a power drill or something, right? And then Google arranges for you to appear in the comparison shopping thing on top, and you're one of the top 10. Well, apparently that's illegal in the EU, and they got fined last year from doing that, and they just hit them with another huge fine. The EU doesn't play around. Good grief. In other news, Warren Buffett is giving away $3 billion with a B dollars in stock to 5 foundations this year in 2018. That's the largest amount that Berkshire Hathaway has given away. Well, actually, let me backtrack. That he has given away. He's the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway so far. And wow, that's amazing. Good for him, I think. He's so far he's given away $24.5 billion. You gotta like that guy for that, right? Like, that's a good thing. Welcome to the Facey Chat, Tehran and TJ Swan and Diana. Welcome. Wow, good for him. Warren Buffett, that guy's a genius too, by the way. I'm just saying, he is super genius. Texas Instruments, which, by the way, when I read this earlier today, I was shocked that they still existed. I'm not going to lie. I was like, they're still around. Well, I don't know. Susan Toohey's a math teacher who's in the Facey Chat. I guess they're just based on the math requirement alone that they're surviving, because we need their calculators. But anyway, Texas Instruments CEO Brian Crutcher resigned from his role for violating the company's code of conduct. Let's see, what did he do? He was only there for 2 months too. All they said was that he violated the code of conduct. We can only imagine what that was. Apparently, there's a pilot shortage. According to Delta, expects to hire 8,000 pilots over the next 10 years. They announced this. They're giving. Okay, now I don't know if I feel too comfortable about that. They're giving conditional job offers to some college students. So yay! They are offering. Claudia Cheek is in the chat. Yay! And welcome, Doug. So the next time you get on a plane, it could be somebody fresh out of college. And some of you guys know that I'm an adjunct professor. Yeah. I don't know if I'm too comfortable with college kids flying planes. I'm just saying. Really? Yeah. Apparently there's a huge pilot shortage. Don't they make like really good money? Why is there such a huge pilot shortage? But apparently there is. Frank said you wish. I teach a class called Computing Environments. It's like Microsoft Office on steroids, Frank. I teach you the whole Microsoft Office in one semester. But yeah, there's a huge pilot shortage. And there's a lot of like stress, from what I understand. American Airlines has started offering loans to student pilots. Some experts even wonder if automation could ease some of the burden. So these are the things that they're considering. They're offering loans. They are offering conditional jobs to college students, and they're considering automation. And what I'm considering is maybe taking a train. Just saying, that's what it sounded like to me. Train sounded like a whole lot better option right now. How safe could it? Yikes. Okay. Yeeks. All right. Walmart, our favorite. Now this is big news. Walmart is thinking about creating a streaming video service. Now, anytime Walmart is considering going into anything, everybody else in the market should start panicking, right? Netflix and Amazon Prime Video, of course, would be their competitors. This is according to the information. If they decide to do this, of course, like everything else Walmart does, it's going to be priced lower than Amazon, I'm sure, and Netflix. Something to look out for. If Walmart starts doing that, I'm all over. How can it be priced lower than Netflix is already like what, $8? Wow. So you figure Walmart's probably going to go like $5, something like that. I'm looking out for that. So that's the Money Talk news. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. We are up against the commercial break, and actually I have a brand new Ron Edwards notebook coming right up. And my guest today is Stephen L. Hayes, chairman and president of fairtax.org. We're going to talk about the Trump tax cuts, a fair tax plan, and how well we are doing with the tax cuts so far. We'll be back in one moment.
Bitterness, a restless or disaster, low wine. Ron Edwards on today's page from the Edwards notebook. For decades, hordes of haranguing, bitter complainers have been making noise about problems both real and imagined. In fact, complaining has become an industry where dummied-down bitter enemies of liberty, like Representative Way Out Waters of California, who sustains her power by taking advantage of government school indoctrinated voters, who think it's just fine and dandy to follow around elderly Senator Mitch McConnell and harass him, or attack Christian patriots who simply gathered to pray for our republic. But to what end? Has the quality of life improved for those whose sole purpose in life is to complain and moan to high heaven about either slavery, capitalism, or even Trump? The truth is, most societal complainers are merely disruptive tools of those seeking to literally destroy this great republic. The Antifa/Soros grunts don't care about improving the quality of life for anyone, including themselves. The biblical definition of complaining means to be left behind. Those complainers will themselves be soon left behind as we the people seek providential guidance to restore America. And join me Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific on shrmedia.com and americaMatters.us. I'm Ron Edwards.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
Who likes paying taxes? Nobody. That's why Eva Rosenberg from TaxMama.com wants you to pay less of them. Read Small Business Taxes Made Easy and learn how legally hiring your spouse and children can slash your taxes. Learn how to set up a business plan that minimizes taxes, the benefits of setting up an exit plan, how to avoid getting audited, and how to legally increase your deductible expenses with better record-keeping techniques. Don't let the IRS squeeze you out of every penny. Visit TaxMama.com. Click on Ask a Tax Question to get free answers to your tax and business questions. That's TaxMama.com.
And welcome back. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. And my guest today is Stephen Hayes. He is the chairman and president of fairtax.org. He's talking to us today about the Trump tax cut and a fair tax plan. I definitely want him to talk about that today. And this is not his first time on Money Talk with Melanie. It's been about a year, actually, since he's been here. Let me give you a little bit of background about Mr. Steve Hayes. Wait a minute. Okay, here we go. Let me make sure I get to it. He graduated with honors from University of Arkansas and the University of San Francisco Law School. He is self-described as a recovering tax attorney. Aren't all attorneys, though, recovering? He spent a considerable amount of time and resources investigating alternatives to income tax. And based on this research, including interviews with tax practitioners, business owners, employees, and economists, he determined the best solution was to eliminate income tax and the IRS and replace them with a national retail sales tax by the states. Everybody loves Steve already, I'm sure. In 1990, Mr. Hayes joined and became president of Citizens for the Alternative Tax System, a nonprofit 501c for lobbying organization, which was the first organization dedicated to the idea of replacing federal income tax with national sales tax. He was also instrumental in forming the Florida Fair Tax Educational Association and currently serves on the FFETA Board of Directors. Hayes has published in newspapers and magazines and regularly speaks to groups of citizens around the country about why we must eliminate the income tax and the IRS and replace them with national retail sales tax. Mr. Hayes has testified before the House Ways and Means Committee and former tax Congressman Kemp's Tax Reform Committee. He is widely sought after as a subject matter expert on tax reform panels and forums, which is very, very true. Without further ado, welcome Mr. Steve Hayes. How are you today?
Melanie, I'm doing great. Thanks very much for having me back.
Welcome. I'm so happy to have you today, particularly since we have so much going on. And the story about taxes, as we discussed before we got on the air, seems to be a little bit buried, right? Because we've been talking so much about foreign policy here lately.
Yes.
It just seems to have kind of stolen the news right now, right?
Well, it has, and although I think it's going to come back because they don't have a choice. They got to get the attention on something more positive. But it has gone away, and a lot of the things that I had predicted, and back before when we were talking, I think have come to pass in that we do have some tax changes. I won't call it reform. We do have a lowering of the rates, which are great. But gosh, Melanie, we've got a situation where the budget deficit is out of control, and a lot of those early benefits of the tax rates are now, being filtered out.
Indeed. And you know what, Steve, when I was prepping for the show, I did go back and look at our last show and look at what the goals were for the tax plan. It was enlightening. The original goals for the Trump tax plan. And listen, I'm not suggesting that President Trump didn't do a good job with the tax plan, but as what tends to happen with these things, it's not even close to the drastic reforms, that were promised.
No, but Melanie, one of the problems I think it highlights, and he's got a lot going on. He's a guy who speaks his mind and sometimes gets in trouble or doesn't speak it quite clearly enough.
Yes.
But on the other hand, here's a guy, it'd be like he goes in to build a building. Now, he's used to the bureaucrats making him do things that don't make any sense for the building code, or messing him around for this or that, or making him do something like that. But they don't tell him how to hire and build the building per se. He's got a building, he's got plans. Yes, they tinker with it, but it's pretty much his building when it's done. And he's the only one that controls it. And he comes up with a building. Well, he brings that same philosophy to Washington, and he tries to say, okay, here are my goals, as you have pointed out.
Right.
And here's what I want to do, and let's go do it. And then he gets told, and sometimes politely and sometimes not, that isn't the way it works up here. We have to do these things to balance all of the interest. Primarily, the people who are in the swamp want to protect the swamp. They don't really care about you and me or anybody else. And so he ran into that juggernaut of where, he had to settle for a lot of things that I'm sure he gritted his teeth, and he's got to be throwing darts at a lot of these guys. Because
sure.
They absolutely, emasculated what could have been a much better plan, and they've created something that's in the image of the swamp. I mean, you've got to, look at some of the things they've done. They've created a form, a postcard, but when you look at all the things you have to attach to the postcard, it's longer than the other 1040. You've got a situation where CPAs are talking about having their biggest year ever in fees for tax planning. You've taken an impossible code and made it worse.
Yes.
And all of the people that wanted to keep their benefits, but I mean, I go back and I look and I shake my head at the fact that when they were talking about increasing the standard deduction to $24,000, which means, you get to make the first $24,000 of decisions, not based on the tax code, but what Melanie wants to do. And, some of the people against it, you would think, well, the realtors, because they realize that instead of 30% itemizing, which is what you have to do to get the mortgage interest deduction, it's going to drop down to under 10%. What does that mean? That means it becomes more clear that it's a subsidy for the wealthy. And I've been on panels with these heads of realty, the state realtor groups and all, and they sit there and they tell you, yes, our studies show that if you get rid of the mortgage interest deduction, home prices could go down 15%. Well, conversely, what that means is that home prices are 15% higher for the 70%, soon to be 90%, who don't itemize, Melanie.
Right. And who
and
is that? Those are people who are in the lower tax brackets. If you're not
that's
itemizing.
exactly right.
Right.
And that's most of the people in America.
Right.
And so they, and they of course shut up when I bring that up. What are they going to say? But that's one group. But another group were the Catholic bishops. And the reason was they had been told that if people had a higher standard deduction, they may not be as charitable, because when you're looking at standard deduction and you say, well, it used to be 12,000, I'm only going to have 14, I might as well give 5 more to the charity, to bring it up. But they were against it because what's happened, the good news, and this is something I really don't know how Trump got it through, but this is something that's a real death blow to a lot of the swamp, because you've just taken 20% more of the American people out of depending on getting some supposed benefit from the income tax code. And you've just focused all the rest of us on that, 8, 9, 10% of people who itemize. Now, anybody may need to itemize 1 year. If I have a whole bunch of medical expenses and other things, yeah, I may have to itemize.
Right.
But for the most part, the 24,000 takes care of what I'm doing. And let's say I have 26,000 of deductions. Well, is it worth going to all the trouble of itemizing for that extra 2,000? Because all it means is, if my tax bracket's 30%, I'm going to save $600. Well, it's probably cheaper, and it probably would cost me that with a tax preparer.
Right. That's
So
what I was just
I'm
thinking.
better
Like
off not.
right. Your tax preparer is right in there. So you're which of course, if you're, depending on your tax bracket, who, you don't care if you're in, that 1-2%, everybody talks about the 1%, but heck, if you're in the 5%, you don't care. If
No.
You know what I mean? You don't care if you're paying, $500 for your tax preparer.
No, but what we need to do, we hear all of these people complaining about subsidizing, and it's wrong, and lots of abuse with people getting subsidized that shouldn't be. I don't say that's wrong, but none of them complain about the wealthy people who, frankly, where do these guys get most of their contributions? They don't get it from people who are working in the factory. They get it from the wealthy, who are the ones that itemize, because they're the ones that buy the biggest houses, and they're the ones that do these various things and benefit from the tax code. But frankly, by having our 90% of the houses 10 to 15% more, just so that somebody can buy a slightly bigger home, hey,
Steve,
I'm not in favor of that.
I feel like you are suggesting that somehow influenced tax policy, and
I think I am. I think that's very astute.
That's so
No,
you're so cynical, Steve.
That the lobbyists had their biggest year ever in income last year.
Now that, see, isn't that why? Look. Look, this is why we put up with President Trump now. This is the whole reason why we put up with him not being a politician, and we put up with the foolishness that we have to put up with, because we're supposed to be like swamp free now.
Yeah, but let me tell you, if it hadn't been for Trump starting where he started, their idea of tax reform wouldn't even be identifiable as anything except more benefits to their friends.
Sure.
They would have given you and I what Nancy Pelosi calls crumbs, but they would have primarily taken care of their friends. So
Sure.
Trump at least helped us in that respect.
Sure.
But contrast that, Melanie, and look at how much Washington is really afraid of something like the fair tax, which says you get rid of all of these tax breaks that are built into the, and bought and paid for and all that, and you go to a system where nobody files a return except a retailer, and they don't file a return of all their income and taxes and all that. They file a return based on their retail sales. It's a sales tax.
I love that idea.
Have all of that. It's very simple, but look at 90% of the money that went for this tax bill, and all these people, the talking heads, and all these people that make their living off of the present code, that all goes away, Melanie.
Oh, it certainly,
that all goes away.
It certainly does. I'm posting a link to your website, which of course I had open, and I was looking it over. I've been there before, of course, but for those who are not familiar with the idea of fair tax, and if you missed the open, I kind of did a quick and dirty of what the idea of the fair tax is. You can take a look at the fair tax website. It's really a very interesting concept, and it's very simple. It really is a very simple concept, and I don't see, and quite frankly, it would solve the issue of the, side note of the immigration problem, and
it would help a huge amount. Yes. Yeah, and look at the other thing. You and I were talking before we came on about the elephant in the room right now for all of our spending and income is tariffs. I mean, if we got into a huge fight on tariffs and prices went up 15-20% on a lot of consumer products, that would really impact all of us, or not all of us, but all of us are not ultra rich. And yet you've got a system where the income tax absolutely favors imported goods, because everybody else that we trade with, and I mean everybody, has a value-added tax / goods and services tax. In other words, they have a tax on imported goods through consumption at the federal level.
Right.
And so what happens is when one of those trading partners exports a product to the U.S., at the border, before it goes, the person doing the exporting is able to fill out a paper and get a check or a credit, in some cases, of the amount of the government tax that was built in. And if you've got a 20% tax, that's in most cases a value-added tax, then they get 20% of that price back. So now it ships over here, in my example, at 80% of what it would sell for in Europe to compete with our products. And what do? Nothing. We tax it nothing. We only tax the profit that somebody selling it makes, which might be 2 or 3% when you come down to it. I think the last number I saw was between 2 and 3% of the imports are actually the percentage they're taxed. Whereas when we export, we do exactly the opposite. We don't give back the weight of the taxes, the Social Security, the Medicare, the income tax, all the taxes built into the product. We send it over at the same price it sells here. When it gets there, what do? They tack onto it their sales tax.
Yeah.
And so we are actually shooting ourselves in the foot on imports, and then we're not happy we just get rid of one foot. We shoot ourselves in the other foot on exports.
Absolutely we do. And President Trump has an absolutely valid point. And then I forget who was over here a couple of months ago when we were talking about that. I want to say it was Switzerland. And the argument was, well, you guys are bigger than us. Your economy was big. I was like,
bend over, folks. Let us live off of you, and that's just like another subsidy. We are subsidizing the rest of the world.
Right. The argument is always like, you guys have more money.
And that's what I mean, and it's not fair. Well, what's fair is for everybody to be competitive and to be able to stand on their own and not rely on penalizing me so they can benefit. And that's really what's happening. And so instead of having to put in tariffs, and you still will in some cases, this is not going to solve all the problems.
Right.
But look how much closer we would get if we were able to have on Chinese products, I think their rate's 15%, maybe 16.
Right.
But having a 23% sales tax, which is the fair tax rate, when a product comes in. So suddenly, when their product hits here, it's going to have 23% added into it. So it's going to be that much less competitive
Right.
with U.S. products. What does that mean? That means we got a better chance of competing. Now, if the Chinese are doing what they often have done, which is taking a product that should cost, even in China, $1 and subsidizing it 50 cents so they can dump it on us and drive our people out of business, which they have been documented to have done.
Yep.
That's where you're still probably going to need a tariff. But all things equal, about 80% of these, quote, imbalances would be remedied if we simply adopted a tax system like everybody else is using, and we quit subsidizing them through our tax system. And the other thing that I really think is totally frightening to any European, and I've only talked to a few of people over there that really understood the economics of it, but it really frightens one particular German gentleman, and that is if we went to the fair tax as our only federal tax, we suddenly become the biggest tax haven in the world.
Yeah.
We suddenly become like the Cayman Islands, except we have the biggest economy, at this point, the safest economy, at this point, the safest currency. We're not the one going through all the devaluation like the Chinese yuan and others. And we're going to be in a situation where we are the most friendly investment climate. So you've got somewhere, and you see different numbers, but between 15 to 30 trillion with a T, $1 trillion that they call on the shelf. And what does that mean? That doesn't mean you go into a grocery store and there it is. It means that it's out there in nobody's control. In other words, it isn't under the jurisdiction of any country. They do it through all these tax havens with trusts and all, but it's sounding out there, and the people who run this money have an incredibly tough job in that they have to try to make investments, obviously, and they look for ways to make those investments pay off. Well, you got a country that's got the best currency. That's very important, because if you're a Chinese person and your yuan just devalued, supposedly it's going to go as much as 15%. It's already at 6 or 7. And you've got a situation where when you do make that investment, you get taxed on the profit. You've got an incentive of probably 20 to 30% to be over here. What does that mean? That means that if you put $1 over here and you made 5%, you're maybe 30% better off than if you made 5% in China. So where are you going to put this money? You're going to put it where it makes the most sense. You know, not because they like you, Melanie, not because they like me, but because they think it's better. Now, what happens when, and let's just say that we were able to get in this $5 trillion. Now, that's a huge amount of money, but that's anywhere from a third to a sixth of what's out there being, moved around right now. And if we were to get that in, now in the last 15 years, we've had a total of about $5 trillion of foreign direct investment, they call it, FDI. If you put that money in and you look at the number of jobs Department of Commerce brags about being created and all that, you've got a really interesting situation. Well, take and say, add another $5 trillion to it. Well, what's going to happen? It's going to go into capital.
Right.
And that $5 trillion of capital is going to lead to more jobs, better paying jobs, but the multiplier effect is going to be somewhere between 3 and 6 times. You got all these various economists when they do their formulas, but that's pretty much agreed. It's somewhere in that range. So it's going to increase our economy almost by our GDP.
Well, why would you want to do something like that, Steve? Listen, we're up against a break.
Suddenly, we've got revenues coming in
right
off the sales tax that start doing things. Unless they go totally nuts, we actually can start reducing our debt.
Oh, goodness
Because not
gracious.
only do we make up our deficit, but we also start making excess that we can pay off the debt. Now, that's no guarantee the swamp's not going to want to spend it.
Well,
But
we've
got an engine that allows us to do that
for
at
sure.
that point in time.
For sure, we're up against a break, and I do have a couple of comments that I've been recording in the Facey chat that I want to talk to you about on the other side of the break. We're listening to Money. We're listening. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. My guest today is Stephen L. Hayes, chairman and president of FairTax.org. We're talking about the Trump tax plan. We're talking about tariffs. We're talking about how tax. Well, we're not really calling it tax reform. How the new tax laws have affected us and how the tariffs have affected us. Very informative as usual. Very excited to have him on the show today. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
The new show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, every Wednesday. Live and direct on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
Cuban by race, Christian by faith, American by nationality, and conservative by choice. Reverend Ralph J. Chittum Sr. is the right guy on SHR Media from 8:05 to 9 p.m., Monday through Friday. And if on the rare occasion I am ever wrong, I will still always be right. The right guy on SHR Media.
When dirty politicians, shadow governments, and deceptive Islam blind the world with fake stream media smoke, their only fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through shrmedia.com, highplainstalkradio.com, and the Western Free Radio Network at Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes for a different perspective weekly on the Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's no surrender ever, because truth is not always pleasant.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon.
Free Radio Network.
Join us
at
for the right
Spreaker,
way.
YouTube,
Shannon
and
and Wright,
iTunes for a
Monday
different
through
perspective.
Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics,
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
and all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events? All kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
Who's going to take Sean's chair?
I'll run the buttons if you want.
What?
The slider
The what?
thingies.
The
Those
what?
things.
We have those?
Yeah, right over there.
Where?
It's on the board. God damn technology.
Fucking technology.
I know. What are we going to call it?
Call what?
The show.
What?
The show.
What show?
The new show, Wednesdays. Every Wednesday on shrmedia.com. 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. Sackheads.
Against tyranny.
There you
Against
go.
tyranny.
I like that. Let's do it. You guys are bored.
Hello, I'm Tim Hart. I'm the guy Beezy hires due to his shameless contract with the SHR Media Network to voice his promos. He'd like me to tell you that the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be found on SHR Media Network, Spreaker, and YouTube every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m.
p.m. Pacific, featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American media maggots won't. You'll find that the speech is free, but the drinks are not. There, in the saloon, just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, BZ is sending his personal drones of freedom into the wheelhouses and ossicles of lovers of sovereignty and liberty nationally and globally. Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, BZ swears that no rights were harmed in the making of this promo.
And we're back. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I am your business diva, Melanie Collette, and my guest today is Stephen L. Hayes, Chairman and President of FairTax.org. He is talking to us today about the Fair Tax Plan and Trump tax cuts. And I wanted to tell you that I have a little method that I use when people ask questions in the Facey chat. I try to copy and paste them on another page so I remember them, because otherwise I will forget them. Chris Gaines commented, he said, simple goes against our government's idea of taxation by keeping us in the dark or bombarding us with a code that nobody can understand, keeps them in a position to use taxation or lowering of taxes as an issue that empowers politicians. It's so true. While creating hidden taxes that are always increasing for their reckless spending. How about that?
That is so true, and that honestly is another reason why so many politicians are against the fair tax. It's not even because they've thought through what he has pointed out, which is very smart, but because they look at it and they say, wait a minute, you're going to tell the American people, not just the ones that pay tax, not even because, but every single one of us, when we make a purchase, whether we're 5 years old or 88, how much the government costs. Every time they make a purchase, you're going to make us show them that. There'll be a revolt. I actually had a politician tell me that, a member of Congress. And that's one of the things that they really fear, because, as he pointed out, under the income tax and the payroll tax, it's very easy to hide what it is that they're taking. You know, we've all grown up assuming that our income is what we net. And we don't pay attention to how much it costs us to buy something. We say, oh, I'm going to go buy something for $1. But we don't realize that there's only one tax, and that's a consumption tax. It's either before you consume, which is payroll taxes and income taxes, or it's at the time of consumption. But it's still a tax on consumption, because if I lose 30% of my income to payroll taxes and income taxes, I only have 70% to use to consume. I'm not the government. I can't print money. So I have only that left. If I have 100% and I go out and buy something and pay the tax then, I may end up with the same 70, 75%, but it's my choice, Melanie. I made the decision, not some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C., and people don't realize, because we've been numb to this, that when they go out and they buy that dollar item, they had to make $1.25, $1.30, $1.40 to net the dollar. So they've already been taxed on their consumption. Oh. What we're talking about is absolutely anathema to D.C. We're saying, show people the truth. And boy, they don't want that.
No, they don't want that. I think Sean Hannity one time broke that down as far as how much taxes you actually pay. When you break down your property taxes, your school taxes, and your sales taxes, how much you actually pay, how many times over and over and over again that same money is taxed. And then let's not even talk about death taxes. Like, let's, tax like into the ground. It's ridiculous. No, it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, I had another question in the Facey chat. Richard Herschel asked what you think about the opportunity zone provision in the tax bill. Did you think that was helpful?
Well, it's a start, but again, you're starting with a flawed system to begin with. yes, it's a clever idea, but why not go to something like the fair tax where every place is an opportunity zone?
Now, is that the 3%? Are those the zones where taxes are lowered, like 3%?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure that we knew what those.
Yeah.
For those of you who may not live near one of those zones, there are areas where the sales taxes are lowered. They tend to be high minority areas, and it's kind of funny for me as a brown person. It's kind of funny because I tend to go to those areas to do things like get my hair done. Like I live in Cape May, which is like 2% minority, like forget black, like minority period. Like forget brown, forget like black, like minority, like Asian, anything,
Right.
any person of color. So I typically have to drive someplace where there are people of color. Like to get my hair done, I have to drive to a place where there's like some black folks. So, and that area happens to be an opportunity zone. So, which is good for me because the products that I tend to have to buy are kind of expensive. So
Yep. Well, it helps,
out.
but also think about this a minute. I mean, let's talk about this real quick and answer what he's saying. How many people under our system today have not created their own opportunity zone? This is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about just minorities. I'm talking about the plumber. I'm talking about the guy that cuts your grass. Lots and lots and lots of people have decided that for whatever reason, their taxes are too high, and they're either not reporting the income or they actually are creating deductions that don't exist, because with the audit rates at historically low rates, there's almost no chance of being caught. And that's why the amount of evasion over the next 10 years is supposed to be over $9 trillion. So this particular system has created a new class of people that have decided to make their own opportunity. And in a lot of respects, you can say, I'm not sure I disagree totally, except it's against the law, and it's actually a situation where the taxes that they don't pay are paid by people like you and I, Melanie, who choose, for whatever reason, we've decided we're not going to break the law, we're going to pay the tax that's due. So you've got a situation under this system that has been creating a lot of cheats, tax cheats, and my concern is when you start breaking down the rule of law, if you're not going to obey one law, why should you obey another law? And I think it's so simple to say, look, let's get rid of all of these things that create this opportunity to do it because you feel like you're at the effect of the swamp. Let's put all the money in your pocket. Let you make your own tax decisions based on what you do. But because of the incredible amount of money that's going to flow into the economy because of all the growth, you're going to be making more money. You're going to have more to spend, and you're not going to be looking and saying, well, that person's getting away with it, I'll take my share.
Right.
No. We're putting into effect the kind of taxation that helped spawn the incredible growth in this country, because this was what we had as a way of funding the government literally up to 1913 with the 16th Amendment. We were using tariffs, customs, duties, and excise taxes. That's in the Constitution. Those are allowed. Why didn't they put income tax? Because they said, they being Hamilton and Madison and others who wrote the Federalist Papers, they said because a sales tax controls abuse. If government tries to make it too high, people just stop buying things or they go underground.
I was about to ask the silliest question. I was going to ask why no one has taken this to the Supreme Court, and said the IRS is unconstitutional as an institution. Why have they not been sued?
Well, they have been. It just never gotten really to court because a lot of the actual cases have been filed. Like I did in the 90s, there were a couple of people who became rather famous because they maintained that the income tax was illegal, the way it was being enforced, the IRS. Routinely, they sued not only the IRS for being unconstitutional, search and seizure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But they also, sued on the basis that the tax wasn't legal and all these different things. And it gives you an idea of how successful they were. That a couple of these interviews I did from the federal penitentiary when they were on the phone there calling me.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, the radio host would set it up and he would have them call in, but they'd be calling from a phone at the federal, penitentiary. So the problem has been that, all of these guys are in it together. And I mean, the Supreme Court, everybody knows that if they cut off the spigot, which pays all their salaries and funds government, it would be an absolute chaos. They're not going to do anything to hit that. We have to, as citizens, take it upon ourselves to say, it's our country, and we want it back.
Yeah.
And we're going to take it back by controlling what you guys can do, and you can't hide from us how much money you're taking. You have to show us, and we're going to judge you based on your performance.
You wanna read an eye-opening book? I was at CPAC a couple of years ago, and someone offered me this book called, do I have it on my little bookshelf behind me? Called Bureaucratic Bombs. If you want to be mad about how your tax money is spent, it's not behind me. It must be on my other bookshelf. You want to be mad about how your tax money is spent and how much money they waste? And by the way, how much money is completely MIA? And I mean, like, they literally don't know where it is.
Right.
They literally don't know where it is. I repeat, they don't know where it is. The government is so huge, they don't know where the money is. And the government has these huge areas of the budget. If you take the time to actually track, and these are things that I've researched. One of the great things you get to do as a writer, when I freelance write, and one of the great things you get to do is research. And you will find, my editor asked me to research this one thing, and I'm like, okay, I know I don't suck this bad at finding information, and I couldn't find this one piece of information. You know why I couldn't find it? It didn't exist. And this is the government. It was how many regulating agencies we have. And finally, I found this piece of information that said the government literally has no idea. That's how big the government is. They don't know. That's your tax money, people. It's crazy.
It is totally crazy. And the part that's even crazier is when you point that out to the bureaucrats in D.C., they look at you like, what are you concerned about?
Because you guys work for us.
Yeah.
So,
what are you concerned? We're the government. We're here to help you.
Yeah, not really.
And so basically, literally, I can tell you stories of meeting with these bureaucrats over the years and talking about some things that you and I and all your listeners know to be true. For example, one time in the Treasury, I'm meeting with these two guys who are very high up.
Oh my gosh, it's Steve, I hate to cut you off, but it's 6 o'clock, and I want the audience to know how to get in touch with you before we leave.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go, please.
I just realized it. Go. We were having such a good conversation, but tell the audience how they can find you.
Go to fairtax.org, fairtax.org.
Yes.
And you can read about it. I write articles each week, and I think you might find those interesting. And you can join us sign up for our newsletter or just learn more about it. We'd love to have you help us. We're all volunteers, but we all believe it's the right thing for America. And Melanie, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Likewise, my friend. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You rock. Thank you, everybody in the Facey chat, everybody who's listening via podcast and via download at SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. All of you guys rock. Remember, all of this is very important because after all, it's your money. Have a great night.